Welcome to Inside the Upside Down. We are going to be talking about ancient origins tonight, ancient civilizations, all that great stuff. I'm Mike Ricksecker, your host, ghostorian, and author. With me is our chat shenanigator, Shauna, and also the love of my life. So she has many different hats that she wears around here. So, need to thank Chanel, who gave us a $2 super chat in between the shows. Thank you very much, Chanel, for that. And for all of those newcomers out there, if you have not yet, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Click that little bell icon to get notifications. You're supposed to get notifications whenever we go live. And, sometimes YouTube kind of acts up and is a little squirrely sometimes, which is why we have the White Rabbit Notification Squad. So you guys go ahead, get out there, share that stuff so that those who didn't get the notification know that the show is on. And Donna Gorton's the one that organizes that. So, Thank you very much, Donna. So, really need to thank Dale Kazmarek for a great show on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. That was absolutely wonderful, and I know we had a bunch of more questions for him. So, but you guys will see him at the Haunted Road Media Paracon, all those who will be going to that. And that's only a week and a half away, Shauna. Can you believe that?
I'm definitely ready for it. A lot of people are. I think it's going to be a pretty epic event for our first run. So
it seems like it. We got a lot of great people are going to be there. A lot of great speakers, a lot of great vendors. We have the paranormal investigation that night. There's going to be the Goldenrod Showboat exhibit. We have live music going on. For the speakers and vendors, there's actually going to be food, and and then we have to thank Dave and Donna for everything they've done to help us out with that. And everybody else who's helped us out with that. Bonnie, Vanessa, anybody on the sidelines have been supportive. All you guys. So, all right. So let's get into this. Now, this is we're getting into. I know we've done history on this show before. We haven't done a lot with ancient history, and this is actually a topic that I started talking about 3 years ago. I was doing a lot more research into ancient history, ancient civilizations, its relationship with the paranormal, the different mysteries that are still out there that we still need to uncover. Kind of inspired, Shauna, by the stuff you've been, of course, visiting you this past weekend, the stuff that you've been listening to put yourself to sleep. And I was like, I need to get back into that stuff. So.
Yeah. It didn't used to put me to sleep, Every video in that playlist I've watched at some point, and that's why it's a part of the playlist. But like whenever you're doing stuff, you listen to documentaries and stuff like that as background noise. And I think, it's not that all of a sudden it becomes boring and that's why we fall asleep to it. It's just that maybe your brain's taken so much in that it needs to shut down and it's still processing in there. But some of the voices, they're just kind of soothing also. And yeah, so I used to listen to Haunted Room Media stuff, a playlist. But then I found myself staying up late and watching the stuff, and so I figured I better stop, doing it.
But you guys should try crashing out the Haunted Road Media playlists. We recommend that. Binge watch as much as you can. So what I am going to start this with is a trailer that I had put together almost 3 years ago of what I called it Ancient Historic and Supernatural Secrets or something like that. And so it kind of gives you a preview of the different topics and areas and historic locations that we were going to cover in that series. And basically this show is kind of going to glaze over all of that, and we'll get into a couple of specifics. I'm sure we'll have an interesting discussion. I saw Fungi already talking about how things are probably at least 10,000 years older than they are. We'll definitely get into that. So all right, I'm going to play this trailer. Shauna, like I told you, you're not going to be able to hear it, so I do apologize for that. So, and there is a $10 super chat from Tom McNicholas, 11 Days to Alton. Absolutely. So, Here's the so thank you, Tom, and here is the preview.
Somebody down here with us?
All right, so that's kind of a taste of what that series was supposed to be. Maybe one of these days we'll go ahead and revive it, but for now we're just going to keep it on inside the upside down right here. And you know how young I was. It was only about 7 years ago. Come on. I wasn't that young. Jeez. That's kind of like the pic that Vanessa threw up there like a couple weeks ago, and everybody was talking about how young we looked, and it was like, it was 7 years ago. Come on. So, all right. So some of you may have recognized some of those different locations that were in there. You know, of course, like the pyramids. Some of you may have recognized Gobekli Tepe, if I could say it, Gobekli Tepe. We're going to get into that because kind of the big question that I always wanted to do for episode number 1 of this whole thing is, you know, how old is antiquity? How old is civilization? You know, if you look at mainstream archaeology, it's basically has us popping up about 5,000 years ago in the Tigris and Euphrates, the Sumer, the ancient Sumerians, all that, which the ancient Sumerians were there and they influenced a lot of what we have going on today. But I threw out a Gobekli Tepe out there, and that has kind of thrown a huge monkey wrench into everything that we've kind of known as far as civilization. Because back then, this thing is dated about 11,000 years ago. And back then, we were just supposed to be hunter-gatherers, just kind of running around, killing animals, living in caves, that sort of thing, right? Fungi, mainstream archaeology is bullshit. Well, they have a narrative that they're trying to keep, right? So, of course, I have picks. So let's get into some picks here. So there's Gobekli Tepe. And so this thing pops up out of the ground. And what's interesting about this is it appears to have been purposely buried by the people who built it. And of course, that lends a big question as to why they would have done such a thing. But this is, a place of worship, a place where people gathered. And they have these, very, very interesting, structures here where, they have the animal carvings. You got the, the large blocks, that are in the shape of a T. And you have to wonder, okay, why did they hide this? And so, there's B3 Aerospace. Gobekli Tepe is fascinating. It absolutely is. And, who were these people? It's kind of the big question. Who were these people, that built this? Why did they end up hiding it? Did they know about, because this is around the time, 11,000 years ago, during this whole era, there was a lot of back and forth with the ice ages, the glaciers, what have you. There are times where there was more water coming to the world. The Great Flood was around this period of time. So did they know about the Great Flood? is that something they were preparing for? They didn't want this damage. They hid it. Was there somebody else coming around that they wanted to protect it from? What they have uncovered so far in 20 years of uncovering it is only about 5%. You think of Stonehenge, and this predates Stonehenge by about 6,000 years. You take Stonehenge and you multiply that by like 20 at least. This place is pretty big, and so it makes you wonder. Okay, so if civilization predates by at least another 5,000-6,000 years at least, what else do we have wrong in all this? So Kathy Saliento, I think our carbon dating needs to be re-examined. And see, per Tom, House of Seven Gables and Salem, Mass. Does it have anything to do with history in Salem? Always wanted to know. It's a good question. I don't know if we're really going to get into that this evening, though. In Fungi, we have advanced technology back then that we lost and had to be rediscovered. Yeah, see, that's a good point, because if you look at this in the way that these structures are situated within that circle around there, a lot of people have likened these things to tuning forks, in that maybe they were collecting energy in all these different circles that are there. Not to mention they have all the different pictographs and what have you. So it kind of makes you wonder what in the world they were tuning into. So, yeah, Adam Tillery's in the chat talking about Stonehenge. Adam Tillery was just at Stonehenge. And so, since we're talking about it, let's bring it up. And then, Shauna, I can kind of rope you back in here by talking about Stonehenge, because, and there it is, there's Stonehenge. We should actually have a picture of Adam here in front of Stonehenge. So, now this was 6,000 years later. And this is really just a part of the original structure that was there. There were the blue stones that were in the middle. There was supposed to be another ring that was around the whole thing. Of course, many different theories as to who built this, who built Gobekli Tepe. But, Shauna, I think where maybe you can kind of come back into this on is... oh, I'm sorry. So let me go back here a second. So I kind of jumped the gun a little bit here. So Gobekli Tepe, this is in Turkey, in the Anatolia region of Turkey. So I'll kind of wrap back up into all that stuff. So Stonehenge, of course, there's a lot of theories about what this was used for. Was it used for a calendar? Was it, it was almost used as like a power station for energy. It sits on a ley line, so we can certainly talk about ley lines here. So an interesting story about this. Has anybody heard of the Stonehenge hippies back in 1971? And I know that there's a little bit of a delay here, so let's see if anybody's heard of the Stonehenge hippies. So, yeah, Sherry Williman. Some people think that Stonehenge is a portal to another dimension. Yeah, some people think that too. That's kind of what the Stonehenge hippies are all about. So let's see. I'll give it another couple seconds here. B3 airspace, yes. Okay. So yeah, the Stonehenge hippies. So in 1971, the story goes that a group of teenagers were up there in Stonehenge, camping out. They were, they had a nice little fire going. They were trying to, channel essentially within the structure of Stonehenge. And what ended up happening after a while, it was a police officer that observed all this. All of a sudden, there was lightning, and a storm started rolling in. And because of, all the, I guess, natural activity from the storm, the teenagers, kind of said, okay, I mean, they carried on for a little while, but then, they're like, okay, let's go into the tents here, because it's getting a little crazy. But they had this tents there, like around Stonehenge. Well, the police officer observed this blue light just start glowing off of Stonehenge, like basically in a circle. And he heard just these screams and these wails coming from the teenagers, and then all of a sudden, dead silence. Blue light was gone, dead silence. The teenagers were completely gone. So it makes you wonder about portal activity. And Shauna, you have some experience with ley lines from being right there in Campsville. So you probably talk a little bit about the power of ley lines and in portals. And could this have been some portal activity going on there at Stonehenge with this?
Yeah, I and until I started, working at and exploring and researching the cafe, I had never even really delved too far into anything beyond just spirit activity. But we wanted to know why the place was so active beyond just whatever dramatic events, whatever traumatic events had happened in there. Why every time we were in that building did we hear different voices, different people just constantly. Another investigator came in and said that it was almost like a 7-Eleven, like a truck stop. Like there was just constantly something different in there all the time. And, so Jeannie, who we really need to get on the show,
Yes.
we had pondered that, idea amongst ourselves, ley lines, and to see, how that affects, if it would have any effect, any bearing on that particular location. And according to her, from research that she had done and others had done, that the cafe was sitting on, what was called like a connector point, and from what I understand, places like that usually have more energy attached to them. And it made perfect sense because the energy was just, off the charts in that building. And like I said, there was the major players, that I called them, the voices that we always heard. Then there was just always somebody new. Every single time we were in there was somebody different.
Yeah.
So.
And Adam Tillery is saying, swear to God or whoever you want, the place gives you a strange buzz, talking about Stonehenge. So I know Adam had a good time up there. And Candy Orton says that she drew a pencil shadow picture as a young child of Stonehenge before she even knew where or what it was. That's pretty interesting. Huh. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, so you have these different places around the world like this that, that harnesses different energy like this. So, it could be one of these, different hinges like this, like Stonehenge, like Gobekli Tepe, like the Great Pyramid. A lot of people talk about how, the Great Pyramid could have been, a type of power plant harnessing that energy. And, you got the three there in a row that, basically off the, belt of Orion, that tie into, all the astronomy. And that's, what a lot of our, ancient ancestors did, is they tied these different monuments into, the astronomy. So, so Tim Schoen saying, definitely get Jeannie on the show. Having Dale took me back to how I met you two initially. That's cool. Yeah. Candy is fascinated by the whole ley line thing. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And, a lot of these different, structures like this all tie into each other. A lot of them are on that, 30-degree parallel. Like the Great Pyramid, the whole Giza Plateau, Angkor Wat in Vietnam. So a lot of them are around there too. So they all seem to tie into each other, have these different connectors. So. So since we're talking about the pyramids and kind of, the show is on ancient origins, and this narrative that we've been given over the years that doesn't seem to be quite accurate. We'll get into And we did some show recently here, Shauna, on fake history, right? So this kind of plays into that too. We kept it a little bit more recent, a little bit more modern. This is almost like fake history from back in the day, like way back in the day. So let's go to, okay, that's Stonehenge. Let's go to the Great Sphinx. So in Fungi pyramids were not tombs. No, they weren't. So here's the Great Sphinx. Now, people will have you, the mainstream archaeologists, would have you believe this was built by Pharaoh Khafre. What, about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, something like that? Well, here's kind of the problem with this whole setup here. So, well, for one, I mean, okay, the head's disproportionate from the body, so it's been recarved, it's been reshaped into what it is now. That's not the original head on it. A lot of people believe that it was originally a lion, and to to honor the lion would put it into the age of Leo, which would predate the age of Pisces, which we're just finishing off now as we enter into the age of Aquarius. Now, each of these ages are 25,000 years apart. And that totally would destroy the timeline that mainstream archaeology would have you believe for this thing. And the thing that kind of gives that whole idea credence, that when they were first clearing the site, nobody kind of took into account, okay, there's the Sphinx, we can say what we want about it, but they kind of forgot about the rest of the site. And this is the Sphinx enclosure, and you can see the weathering pattern here, which is quite obviously done by water. Now, it's been tens of thousands of years since there was enough water in this region to make that kind of weathering pattern around the Sphinx. So, yeah, there's fungi water. So, fungi is definitely into this one. She's on top of it. Yeah, so this kind of throws that whole, mainstream archaeology argument of the origins of the Sphinx right out the freaking window, because that type of water just wasn't in the region during the time frame that they say that the Sphinx was originally built. So it predates, the timeline that they currently have by far. Of course, remember, they're trying to say, well, civilization, only really came into being about, 5,000 years ago. Well, if you have a Sphinx structure like that, that's, quite possibly 25,000 years old, probably older, because 25,000 years would be like the end of the age of Leo. And the type of water that would have had to been in the region at the time, having to be far before that, you're putting civilization back, a lot earlier. And so, Shauna, I don't think this is, very surprising that we have the kind of quote-unquote authority figures kind of giving us a line of, bullshit about our original history.
Yeah, possibly because, maybe they don't think we can handle the truth, or maybe they don't want us to know the truth. I think it's all aliens.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. And honestly, it could be. And, I know that, hell, I got to throw this out there. Giorgio Tsoukalos. Okay, I mean, we all know who he is. He's the guy with the hair, right? We all have seen the meme. I'm not saying it's aliens. But I actually have to give him credit, because if you watch any of the shows like Ancient Aliens, nobody knows who most of those people are, but everybody knows Giorgio just because of the hair. So great marketing tactic. I got to give them that. Tom McNicholas question: has there been any spiritual investigation on the answers? Good question. A lot of these places people will go and try to feel it out and see if they can tune into something. Like Adam was just saying that he was feeling a buzz there at Stonehenge. People will remote view in, and they've said that they've come back with some very, very interesting tales from different. They were basically able to tap into the past and get stories from people who had lived there at the time. You can take what you want from that. It's so it's interesting because people do tap into this energy in various ways. So have they gone there? People have not gone to, at least as far as I know, people have not gone to the Sphinx and done a paranormal investigation on it like that. You're not going out there with the SLS camera and they might be going out there with an audio recorder. You never know. But I don't know of any team that's actually done like an official paranormal investigation of the Sphinx. It'd be cool though.
Bucket list.
Yeah, bucket list. There you go. Did have somebody trying to get us into the Colosseum at one point. That would have been interesting. Of course, it didn't happen. So, yeah, the whole alien thing, and we will touch on it a little bit here. If you go back to, we're going back into origins. We got to talk about the Sumerians. We got to talk about the Anunnaki. Okay, and it's really kind of interesting, and we'll talk about the two guys here a little bit. Go back into our picks, and where are they? They're down here. So there's Enki and Enlil. So these are kind of the two main Anunnaki gods that interacted with the Sumerian people. And what's kind of really interesting about all of this is they essentially have their own idea of the Garden of Eden, and they're of course their own creation story, and you can see how a lot of what's in the Bible now is kind of derived from all this, and maybe they were the stories that were passed down through the ages and modified, but basically Enki supported humanity and wanted to help them. Enlil was domineering, that didn't care much for humanity. So their idea of the Garden of Eden in their culture was not what we think of, like the traditional paradise and all that. And because of the grabbing from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, we were cast out of that. It was more like in their version of it, it was more that the Garden of Eden was, I don't really want to say, well, basically it was like humanity was almost enslaved to work in the garden. Like I said, Enlil was domineering, didn't care much for humanity, and so humans were there to basically work and cultivate and provide resources for the gods. Well, Enki actually cared about humanity and wanted to help them, and the giving of the fruit from the tree of knowledge, Enki is actually seen as the serpent in their tales, and he's trying to give Eve, or the woman, not necessarily called Eve, but trying to give the woman, okay, here's tools for humanity, here's knowledge for humanity, here's things that you need to make it on your own so that you no longer have to be enslaved by the gods. So it wasn't this like really casting out because of some sin that was committed. It was basically like Enki's trying to pull humanity out of slavery. So it's very, very different take on creation and the Garden of Eden. And Shauna, I know we've kind of had some religious discussions in the past. Not really necessarily need to get too deep into religion here. And I know Vanessa's thrown out there many times on Edge of the Rabbit Hole about how a lot of this stuff predates the Bible. But what do you think about that kind of twist on the whole Garden of Eden story and our origins from there?
There's a reason why I have that in my playlist. I mean, it kind of, it definitely caught my attention. And there's other, stuff in there that's kind of, along similar lines. Um, as you know, I'm not really a religious person, so I am always open to anything else other than that as a as an option. And so I'm very much interested in that take on it.
Yeah, it's definitely different, and it almost makes a lot more sense to me. And if it is aliens, that would make a whole hell of a lot of sense, really. That some race comes down here from wherever they came from, and they they need resources. They need to be able to live. They see some inferior race there. They need some workers or whatever. A lot of people speculate that Enki was kind of like the geneticist of the gods, and did the whole gene fusion or chromosome fusion that we needed to become the human beings that we are. So it almost makes some sense there that would be the case, rather than the traditional version that we've heard. So so B3 Aerospace is saying that she thinks there are many Adams and Eves, and so yeah, you look at that as more of like not necessarily Adam and Eve as single individual people, but as man and woman, as the two different genders. Let's see. Somebody said that Josh Gates investigated King Tut's tomb. So yeah, I guess he did. So there has been some done there. So Rebecca Gardner, since you're speaking about the Garden of Eden, just curious about the concept that Eve wasn't Adam's first wife and that Lilith was. So yeah, that's another take on the whole story. So it's almost kind of like which text do you believe? Again, I don't necessarily believe that Adam and Eve were individual people. So to say that Lilith was also an individual, no, but maybe a type of person. Like, maybe Lilith was a faction of females different from Eve that was also there at the time. I don't know. What do you think about Lilith, Shauna?
I mean, Lilith, to me, if you follow along with her story, basically said, I don't want no man trying to tell me what to do. Here's how it's going to be. Oh, shit, now I'm in trouble. And unfortunately, she followed a bad path. But, I mean, I kind of like her.
Right.
I like her.
That's funny.
I mean, maybe it happened. Maybe it happened that way. It's like I said, I never really, could say, I know there's probably some religious people in here that, follow the Bible like it's gospel. I was raised religious, and then I chose to leave it entirely because, I refused to believe in something that there were no answers to, with no supporting, anything to support. Why? Well, it just is because that's what we believe. Well, then why have, other options out there, And so I just kind of branched off on my own, and here I am today. But yeah, I mean, it's like I always told my dad, who I constantly had religious debates with. If you can produce the actual scrolls and put them in my hands so that I could see what's going on, but that can't happen. And since that can't happen, I can't really, So I'm pretty
Right.
much open to everything at this point. I'll give everything a fair shake. Every story, every whatever. It's all interesting to me. Um, as for what actually happened, I don't know. I wasn't there.
Right, and that's kind of the crux. We weren't there, so you know we're trying to dig for the past as best that we can. So we have these fragments and pieces that how much of it was just legend and storytelling, and how much of it was actually real, and it's tough to discern. Um, as far as let's see, Punga Fungi is saying about Lilith, she considered herself an equal and thinks she should not be in the bottom position during sex. Which okay, yeah, and see the thing, way back then there were a lot more matriarchal societies than patriarchal, and eventually patriarchy kind of took over and suppressed women, which is really a shame. So and they kind of took over and decided to go to war with each other all the time. Where if you have more matriarchal societies, there's not as much war. Go figure that. So very, very different back then, and there's a lot of similarities and things in common over the planet, kind of all at the same time, in cultures that weren't really supposed to be connected because they were in completely different parts of the world. And where we see this, I'm gonna go back into our picks. That's our Inky and Enlil. Where are we? So, and this is specifically about Inky. So with Inky, he basically, he ended up losing the battle with Enlil. Some say he went to Egypt for a while and basically took on the persona of Osiris. Which the interesting stories about Osiris is essentially Osiris was crucified, rose from the dead, and became resurrected as Horus. But then there's also stories that he ended up as an Aztec god. So after basically bailing out of Egypt, he went to what is now Mexico, and this is basically a depiction of Quetzalcoatl, who some people say it may be Enki in the Aztec culture. And you see him here. This is kind of interesting. You see him here as a form of a serpent. We already talked a little bit about Enki being the serpent in the Garden of Eden. He's depicted here as a serpent, and you see he's carrying this sort of handbag thing. And okay, so what's the deal with the handbag? Well, this isn't the only place that the handbag has been seen. Remember, we're just kind of glazing over everything. There's a lot of detail to all of this stuff. But this has also been seen in other cultures, this little handbag. Like, when we're talking about Sumerian culture earlier, where Enki has come from, and here's the handbags. And there's another handbag pick with the Sumerians. So you see these different parallels here, and they're also seen at Gobekli Tepe. So how are these cultures in all these different parts of the world? And they're not just seen in these three different places. They're seen like in many, many different locations. So they seem to have all these different parallels to each other when they're not even near each other at all. So it really makes you wonder how something like that is really possible, given what mainstream archaeology right now is trying to get you to believe about the way the world, how civilization came to be, and how the world was populated. So, yeah, my love, I don't expect you to have any insight on on ancient handbags, but it's
Man
kind of
bag,
man
apparently.
bags. There you go. They're man bags.
Your
um,
man bags.
so, but I don't know. I mean, what do you think about? I mean, is it too coincidental?
I mean, I don't, you know, um, I've never thought that what everybody was programmed to believe was actually right. So, like I said, I'm open to just about everything. Um, Maybe it's not a coincidence, you know. So,
Yeah, the Haglin is saying I was under the impression that the handbag was a weight of the soul. Um, and that could be. The interesting thing to me is how it exists there in all these different cultures in very different time frames. I mean, you take a look at where you know Iraq is. I mean, we'll just use modern countries right now. Iraq and Mexico. You know, totally opposite ends of the world, separated by large oceans. How does that concept get from one place to the other, like almost seamlessly? It's very very intriguing to me. Of course, I'm not saying it's aliens, but there are but there are those that believe that a lot of these places were what's good were I don't know, planted or influenced or whatever around the same time frame, or by similar peoples, or that they tried it in one place, it didn't work there, so they'll try it in another place and see if it works there. So there's a lot of different theories as to how this came to be, and none of those ideas seem to be this conventional mainstream archaeology of like, well, we took thousands of years to come all the way down to where uh, Tenochtitlan was at the time in the Aztec Empire, and it just was coincidence, So, nice, Dawn. Maybe we can use the ghost box to ask questions to people way back then. Oh, yeah, let's do that. So, I don't know. And some of those places are way the heck out there. You might not be able to get a radio frequency. So maybe you might get something.
and how would you know what language? If you're going way, 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 way back, you could be dealing with, dead languages that can't even be deciphered anymore. So how would you understand
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, unless anybody can speak ancient Sumerian. And we have the Canuyeth form, so we could read a tablet. I don't know how you would. Like, some people might know how to pronounce it. I wouldn't, and I wouldn't know to hear it either. So Candy says, "Ask Ghosty." Yeah, it's yeah, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about things that, like Gobekli Tepe. 5% of that has been unearthed. A lot of these places are in locations that are in major political upheaval and can't be touched. You can't get out there. You'd be risking your life to even try. It's which is a shame that there have parts of the world that are in so much unrest that you just can't. Or there might be some areas where they just won't. There's I've heard of stuff where at the Sphinx where they were doing some tests around the Sphinx, and they were, for what they, and I can't remember specifically what they said that they were doing, but in some ground penetrating radar tests, they found what they believe is a large man-made chasm of some sort under the one paw of the Sphinx. And so, they're going to go down there and digging for it, right? Well, once the Egyptian authorities discovered what the heck was going on, the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, figured out what in the world was going on. They're like, oh, we put a whole kibosh to that. Nope, you guys are out. But yet, they've been by a few times saying that they're just doing some, like repair work and some cleanup stuff and whatever, and it appears to be a little bit more extensive than that. So it makes you wonder if, okay, they're kicking these people out because they're about to discover something that might defy, everything we've come to know, and we're gonna go check it out and make sure for ourselves what's down there. Of course, a lot of speculation about what might be down there. Hall of Records, and who knows. You just don't know. So, yeah, fungi, Al Capone vault in the making. So, yeah, and that's some of these places that we just don't know. Maybe we're all an alien petri dish from candy. So, Tom McNicholas, if we came from aliens, where did they come from? The stars. They came from the stars. Yeah, and that's kind of the interesting thing there, Tom, is that, you'll have some people say, well, they came from this star cluster, or they came from that star cluster, all based off of, whenever this was built, and that was the star system it was based off of, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really all speculation, I believe. So, Susie Randall says right on about something I said. B3 Airspace says Orion. Well, maybe the Egyptian ones. Candy says we can't handle the truth. Well, that's what they think. And I guess that's kind of, well, Shauna, let's get your opinion on this. So I think kind of what the major issue for a lot of the world powers is that, of course, we have all these different major world religions. And so if we were to discover, not even necessarily that we're from aliens, but that there are aliens out there, people speculate that there would be like a massive crisis of faith, throughout the world. You think that's true? Massive crisis of faith, and the whole world goes to shit?
I mean, there are a lot of religious people out there just believe one way, they have just one path, there's, all throughout, existence, religion has been the cause of, many dramatic events and wars and this and that and the other, and I think it would be a problem for some people, a lot of people. I mean, oh well, I know that sounded bad. Okay,
tough it out.
I mean,
nice.
I know there are some people that religiously are just closed-minded. That's what you get for being closed-minded. If everybody were open-minded to other possibilities and thought outside the box and prepared for stuff like that, it probably wouldn't be such a shit show out there.
Yeah. So Betty throws out there, did they come from the stars or from underground? So that's an interesting question. So, of course, there is the hollow earth theory that is out there. Some people say it's not necessarily hollow, but there's like enough of a honeycomb system throughout the world that there are races and other beings and what have you living underground. Some people speculate that they came from the stars and they lived for a while up here on the surface and then went underground. There's a lot of different theories. So it makes you wonder. There's people say there's a lot going on in the Four Corners area of the United States. Because there are a lot of tunnels and underground caverns and things like that there. So you never know. Maybe. Zippy says, I truly believe we actually know a lot, but NASA will never release it. NASA or other government organizations, yeah. So, and there's, the idea that, a lot of these places that really resonate, that the government has taken over, that you can't get to it because the military's cracked down on it. There's like parts of the Grand Canyon you can't get to because for some reason NASA has control of it. Freaking Grand Canyon. So let's see. So Kathy Cillian, there's a book written by a Russian author. He says that the Anunnaki created us to be slaves. That's kind of what I was talking a little bit about earlier with Enki and Enlil, was that their version of the Garden of Eden was that the humans were working the garden as slaves and not as we're in like this paradise and very happy and all that, and that Enki actually worked to get us out of that enslavement. So let's see. Kathy also says the Catholics would just say God created the aliens. Well, if there is a creation source of the universe like that, whether it's a being like a God being, or if it's a particular energy or whatever that created it all, that it or he or she or whatever, in that would have created the aliens too. So it's kind of not far off. Yeah, the Hagel, the world leaders probably more worried about keeping their power than whether we'll all freak out. That's actually a very good point. What do you think about that one, Shauna? The world leaders more worried about keeping their power. I think it's probably pretty true.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I can get on board with that.
Yeah. Yeah, because if they don't have a way to keep you suppressed, then guess what? You're not suppressed anymore. Yeah. So, what else am I missing here? So there was a question from Diane. Okay, who created the creator, though? Yeah, that's always the big question. So if there is a creator, who created the creator? Yep. That's always the great mystical question. So, whether you believe, if it's God who created God, if it's somebody else who created that person, it's always the big question. If, like even with the Big Bang, okay, so this great explosion created this whole thing. Okay. What was there before the Big Bang? Yeah. You're saying, because there's the science that says you can't destroy matter, you just change its form. Well, if this is all expanding, this universe is expanding from a single point of where there was some sort of explosion and all this matter is like spreading outward, well, what was it before that explosion? Was it just a condensed ball of matter? And if it was, then what was it in? Yeah, that's something we don't know.
I have a video on my playlist that says, "Do we really exist?"
Well, yeah, I mean, we could all be in the Matrix. Like, seriously, I mean, that's kind of that's almost really the premise of the whole thing, is that, are we really running? Is this around us really reality, or is reality something else? Is this just an illusion for us to take in? And not even the Matrix had it as we were all enslaved, it might not necessarily be that we're all enslaved. It just may be that, that's how we're perceiving, our environment. And, we're just, at our core, I mean, we're a bunch of atoms together, right? That are vibrating at a certain frequency. That keeps us, those vibrations keep us together. That's what keeps, the plastic together like this. In the water is a different vibration. And so, they are not joined together, but that's what keeps the water from flowing out there, the table, all that. If my body atoms were to vibrate at the same frequency as like this bottle, I could put my hand through the bottle, so if you could, I guess, vibrate at the same frequency as, I don't know, some other level of the universe, would you be able to see other dimensions?
Or it could be like in the book Lamb, where you just achieve total enlightenment. You just become invisible. You're just pure energy.
You're just, there you go. You become invisible. Nice.
That book is so funny.
That is. Oh, wow. I know I missed some other stuff. Mike, show us some pictures. Imagery is important. I think I ran through all my pictures. Did I have anything else? Let's see here. So that was all the handbags, right? Oh, I missed this one. Here we go. The Big Shigar idol. It was discovered in Russia. That's not the whole thing. This thing is 17,000 years old. So it was another example of how civilization far predates what they're trying to tell us it existed. This was discovered in Russia. It's the largest known wooden sculpture in the world. Largest known, oldest, maybe it's the oldest, whatever. It's freaking large. It's 17,000 years old. I think that's what it was. Oldest known wooden sculpture in the world. And it has all these different markings on it. Like I say, you can't see the whole thing, but you see all these kind of horizontal markings here near the top. And then there's kind of these like arcs on the next part. And then as you go further down, it has other markings. And nobody knows what the markings mean. They haven't been able to decipher that yet. Or maybe they're not telling us, of course. But it's just another example of how civilization far predates what they've been telling us. So, and that's in Russia. So, yeah, it does look kind of freaky. How large is it? I forget how large it is. Let's see. Oh, okay. That's where I got the 17 from. I'm sorry. 17 feet tall. 11,000 years old. It's the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world. So, yeah. 17 feet tall. So it's pretty big. So, yeah, there's definitely tool marks on it. Yeah, how did it last that long? It was did they find it in the ice? No, it was discovered in a peat bog. So, I mean, wood can last that long if it's not subjected to the air. Wood can actually last a pretty long time. So, yeah, and a peat bog would be one place where air is not getting to it. It sounds kind of weird because of the fact that it's wet. But have any of you guys seen the stuff on Oak Island? So they have found stuff like wooden planks of a ship and things like that out in the swamp there, like in wooden planks from like hundreds of years ago. So I get that this is like 11,000 years old, but because the air wasn't getting to it, it wasn't breaking down. So, Donna says, still in peat should have degraded after more than 17,000 years. Well, except it probably wasn't a peat bog for all of those years. The environment would have changed over the course of time. I'm talking during that time, there were a couple of different ice ages, right? If it was 11,000 years, it would have been at least one more ice age. Around what, the 8,200 year mark or whatever. There's another ice age that came in for a little while. So, yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up because that's all the picks that I had. And I mean, we could beat around the bush a little bit more with a few different things, but yeah, Chanel says, remember the land shift in the wood is from another region. So Chanel studied on this. All right, very cool. Very cool. So do tell. You probably tell it better than I, because I just know a few snippets of the Shigeru idol. Actually, the wood is in pieces. That was many sections put together. It's in pieces. They had to piece it all back together. You can kind of see. I'll go back to it real quick. So you can see the different sections there. There's just the head, and then there's two sections there that have the horizontal lines, and then next two sections. So it's all in pieces like that, and several of them. So, all right. And Betty's like, would bodies from the peat become ghosts? Interesting. I don't know, Shano. You know, we haven't interacted with a lot of ancient spirits like that. I mean, usually they're a little bit younger.
Yeah, all the more reason to go to places like that, that to do that type of investigating, to be able to get into places where the energy there is super old, just to see what, you can get exposed to. Other than that, I'm sure, yeah, there hasn't been any ancient energy around me as far as I know. I mean, if they are, they're not talking. So.
Well, and we could go down the entire road of reincarnation too. So maybe those ancient spirits aren't around us because we are those ancient spirits. Could be. So, all right. Well,
Whoops.
What did you just do?
Sorry.
Dropping your phone. So Tom's saying maybe we should have Haunted Road Media shows to replace Roseanne. Sure. And Donna says, yeah, it would be fascinating to investigate ancient things. Yeah, it really would be. I've definitely wanted to get, Shano, I know we've talked about getting out to some of the older places of the world. So definitely bucket list items for sure.
Have drone will travel.
There you go. Have drone will travel. All right. So let's get to the shout outs. Real quick. So next week, for both Edge of the Rabbit Hole and Inside the Upside Down, we actually have, it's the first time for either one of the shows, we have an in-studio guest.
Yes.
That's Lee Ehrlich. He's going to be in town. He's actually coming through on his way, headed out to the Haunted Road Media Paracon. And so he'll be stopping here for a couple of days. And so Tuesday, Edge of the Rabbit Hole episode will be about, which way did we split it up? So the Edge of the Rabbit Hole episode will be talking about the Haunted Road Media Paracon and Mineral Springs and a lot of the different things that we've experienced there at the Mineral Springs Hotel. And then for Inside the Upside Down, we will be discussing investigating underwater and doing other things with the water, like the water-based EVPs and things like that. So it will be a very interesting time with Lee. So yes, and as Candy says, Lee is awesome.
He is awesome.
Yep.
Yes, he is.
So, all right. So, now let's get to the shout-outs. So, our Super Chat superstars, Chanel F. and Tom McNicholas. Thank you guys for the Super Chats. Really do appreciate it. So, let's get to the shout-outs. B3 Aerospace is asking, Mike, you going to try to do a video during the Paracon or a live feed? Yeah, we'll do something. We'll definitely do something during the Paracon. So, well, let's see. So the night before, we are investigating the night before the Paracon, and so we will go live from there. We'll do some. And I guess we'll probably do a live investigation from Mineral Springs Saturday night as well, and then we'll do some live, probably Facebook stuff. Walking around and saying, "Hey, here's all the different speakers and vendors and stuff." We'll definitely do some live stuff throughout the time on multiple platforms. So, all right. So here we go. So we got Jojo B. Thank you very much. Oh, guys, say thank you to Donna Gorton for Cheshire Cat chatting in the chat. There is Fungi. Thank you very much. Donna says, Bonnie says she'll take me around live too. Cool. There's Candy Orton. Thank you very much, Candy. Kathy Ciliento, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sean Oldsmith from Australia. Thank you. I think Robert White's in here too, isn't he? Our Australia brethren. There's Beat 3 Airspace. And there is Spooky Dawn. Thank you very much. April Wimigwans, thank you for joining us again tonight. Chipper Terry, thanks again. Zippy Davis. So our Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. Gotta give you guys the big shout out. So there is Tom McNicholas, B3 Airspace, Zippy Davis, BD Flint, Pamela Queen, and Don Francisco. Thank you guys very much for being our Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. And so, let's see. More shout outs here. There's Gucci Star. Thank you very much. There's Commander Gaming, Connor.
Hi, Connor.
Good to see you in there. There's Betty and Wayne Lange. Thank you very much. We'll see you at the Paracon. Susie Randall, thanks for joining us tonight. Tim Schoen, thanks again. Really do appreciate it. Who else do we have in here? There's the Haglin. Thank you as well. Shay Carroll, thank you. And I know, well, Adam Tillery was in here. Yep, there's Adam. Cool. Tammy Heitzman, thank you very much. And anybody else? I'm going to scroll all the way back down. See if there's anybody else in here. Sherry Willimon, thank you very much. And there's Diane Hilbert. And I think that's probably going to be about it. All right. So, all right, everybody. Thank you very much. Really do appreciate you coming out. As like I said, this was something that I've wanted to do for a while now. I had that series I tried to kick off a few years ago. And so maybe we'll do a little bit more of this. Let me know what you guys think. Maybe we'll do a little bit more of this down the road, trying to get into some more of this, some more ancient origins, kind of where we come from, how that plays into the supernatural activity. I mean, we kind of briefly touched on a little bit with ley lines and maybe some portal activity at Stonehenge. A little bit about some energy at the different monuments, but something we can explore a little bit more. Just let us know, and we'll see what we can do here. So, all right, everybody, you have a great night, and we'll see you next time.